Al-Shaykh Al-Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar, this great encyclopedia of hadith, reports a narration that is attributed to our sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam, in which he says, خذ بالاحتياط في جميع ما تجد إليه سبيلا. In this short maxim, our beloved sixth Imam, peace be upon him, addresses one of the seekers of spiritual growth who has come and asked him for guidance. And this advice, of course, is not limited to this wayfarer and seeker of spiritual growth, but it is also for all of us. He says to him, as much as you can, in all the matters where you are capable of observing ihtiyat, you should do so. In light and spirit of this honorable hadith, I will shed some light on a very important topic, and that is the culture of ihtiyat with respect to consumption of knowledge. The culture of ihtiyat with respect to consumption of knowledge. We do consume food, we do consume other things, but we also consume knowledge on a daily basis. And it is oftenly mistaken by some of the practicing Muslims that ihtiyat is only in matters of practice, but matters that have to do with intellectual gaining or receiving information or consuming knowledge, precaution is not needed here. You have the green light to learn whatever, to study whatever, to listen to whatever. And this is something that we find in some of our circles, especially among some of our youth, some of our intellectuals, where they feel that there is no limit. I can access any type of knowledge, I can listen to any speaker, and I can take my religious information from whomever because I have the capability to analyze and I have the capability to make judgment. And this is the risk, my dears. And this is what I want to highlight, inshaAllah, after a loud salawat. What type of knowledge are we talking about here? When we say religious knowledge, what are we talking about? Of course, we're not talking about the basics and fundamental beliefs that everyone is responsible for identifying for their own self and establishing by proof, by evidence. We're talking about a level of knowledge that is nuanced in nature, a level of knowledge that has a lot of detail to it, a level of knowledge that the conclusion of which does not come that easy. There's a lot of intricacies involved in the process. When somebody wants to go deeper in understanding Islam, things become a little bit vague and they require more reflection, more studying, and sometimes certain prerequisites. I'm not talking about practical matters, because we know in practical matters we don't have to go through this process because we resort to taqleed. Our maraja tell us this is halal and this is haram. But we're talking about matters that are usually fed to our intellect, matters that factor into our aqeedah, or at least factor into our understanding of Islam. These matters, most of the time, are not set in stone for many people. And therefore, they require a little bit of pondering. They require more careful attention in how we acquire them and from whom we acquire them. The two steps that are encouraged Islamically that we need to adhere to when observing ihtiyat in what we consume with respect to this type of knowledge, the nuanced knowledge, the details, the information that helps us better understand Islam, there are two steps that are encouraged. Of course, there are more, but I'll highlight these two steps, inshallah, in the interest of time. The first of these steps is to know from whom you acquire your knowledge, to know the source. There is a beautiful ayah, and all the ayat are beautiful, in Surah Abasa wa Tawalla, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions different signs, and then He says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِهِ. Let man ponder and look at their food, what they consume. Now, this could be in the context of the miracle of how Allah created nature and created food and so on and so forth, but it could also be in a different context. What is important here is that there's a hadith in Al-Kafi by Shaykh Al-Kulayni attributed to our fifth Imam, Abu Ja'far Al-Baqir alayhi salam. When he was asked, "Oh my master, what is this ta'am that Allah is talking about here? Do you really need to explain what ta'am means to an Arab? It's food." So the Imam is not going to say, well, ta'am means food, because that is clear to the listener. The listener is looking for the layers of the ayah. Usually when the ashab, the companions of the Imam, when they say, Yabna Rasulullah, tell me what is meant by this word in this verse. They're not talking about the literal meaning of the word, because it's clear. Ta'am is food. No, the Imam understands from what they're saying is we want to know the deeper layers. Tell me something about some of the layers, because Quran has layers, has butun, many of them. And those who know the butun are those who are entrusted with the knowledge of the Quran, Muhammad and his progeny. So it says, my master, what is this ta'am? He says, al-ilm, ilmuka, min ayna ta'khudhu. Your knowledge, from whom you take it. It's important to know the source of knowledge. But here are a couple objections or a couple of possible arguments when we say that you need to be careful from whom you take your knowledge. You need to be careful who's the speaker that is feeding your mind. Just like how you're very keen that you don't let anybody feed you food unless you know they're trusted, they're not trying to poison you, they're not going to bring you something haram, they're not going to bring you something contaminated, right? Otherwise, you don't just get stopped by someone in the street and they say, here, come, there's food. The first thing that will come to your mind is, hold on, I don't know this person. I'm not going to eat their food. It's normal. And that's why you verify certain restaurants before you eat from there. Is it halal? If you find out there's some level of contamination and there's a rumor that this place has been caught with some contamination and mixing, you take precaution and you avoid that place. But with intellectual consumption, the situation is more dangerous, because the worst thing that can happen when you eat poisoned food or contaminated food is that your body will stop functioning and it will lead to death, la samahallah, right? God forbid. But the intellectual damage and the poison that can penetrate in our minds, the damage of is everlasting, because that could take us out of the path of truth, and therefore it can lead us to hellfire, wal-'iyadhu billah. So it's not something that we should take easily. So here, the first objection in the instruction of being careful who you listen to and who you allow to fill your mind with information, the first objection is, I'm not a lay person. For you to tell me that you have to go to the person who is trusted, who's righteous, and you listen to them. I don't need to do that. Why? Because I myself, I'm an educated person. I have a PhD. I teach at the university. The first answer to that is, the fact that you're an expert in a specific field doesn't necessarily qualify you to decipher and discern between what is right and wrong in terms of the deeper aspects of another field. You know, your field's engineering, but you're not that educated to know the nuances of that which a doctor knows. I'm talking about the information that is higher level, not talking about basic information, because we all have basic information about medicine, about engineering, but these are basic information. But I'm talking about the deeper level information. If you're from a specific field, you cannot say, just because I'm educated in that field, I can access any field. You give me any scholarly article that is at a very high level and I can read it in any field just because I have my PhD. That doesn't make sense. Likewise, in Islamic studies, there are certain levels and certain details that are not easily accessible to you, even though you are educated. You're educated in math, you're educated in chemistry, you're educated in astronomy, in medicine. That's all respected, of course. But that is confined to that field. It doesn't qualify you to say that because I'm an expert here, I'm an expert in all other fields. That's number one. Number two, my dears, there is something that most of us have heard from the ahadith, specifically from the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. انظر إلى ما قال ولا تنظر إلى من قال. And this is in Ghurr al-Hikam. He says, be keen on what is being said. Don't worry who said it. Now we take this and we say, okay, This speaks against what you're preaching. This says that don't worry about the speaker. Take the content and try to reflect, and if it's right, take it. If it's wrong, leave it. My dears, this is correct in matters that are clear. When there is a piece of advice and wisdom that somebody says, and that somebody to you is not a righteous person or a hypocrite or somebody who's on the wrong path, Imam says, don't deprive yourself of that wisdom when you know clearly it's haqq. And don't deny it and reject it just because the person that brought it to you is someone who's not appealing to you, someone who you don't trust. He says, because you know that what he brought you is true. We're not talking about situations where you know that the person is telling you truth. That's why we respect and take information from people of other religions. I'll give you an example. In the Islamic seminary, one of the most important prerequisites that we all have to go through is logic, mantiq. Well, logic is a Greek science, right? It's founded by the Greek. It's not an Islamic science per se, but Islam says, look, the things that are in it, that which speaks to common sense, the fundamentals, the basics of rationalizing and reasoning and thinking, these things are neutral. And because they are neutral, there's no harm in taking them and benefiting from them. Although the composer, the author, the producer of this type of knowledge is not a non-Muslim, that doesn't matter. So when the Imam says, لا تنظر عليكم السلام, لا تنظر إلى من قال, do not look at who says, but look at what is being said. He's not talking about the things that you cannot distinguish between which is right and which is wrong, which is truth and which is falsehood. No. He's talking about things that you have already confirmed to be true, but you're hesitant to accept it just because someone said it. You know, sometimes even in our cultures, in our circles, in different places, you may receive an advice. Sometimes a father would give an advice to their son, and let's say there's some tension between them. The advice, if they hear it from someone else, they'll right away accept it. But because their dad said it, they're not willing to accept it. Or between spouses. So Imam is saying, don't look at whoever is saying it. If you know it's right and you know it's good, take it. So this is what the hadith is talking about. Not what we are talking about here when you are handing and allowing someone your mind where they would fill it with different types of information. But again, the question is, but why? Why can't we just listen to anybody and follow anyone on social media and read any book for anyone at any level and then just conclude for ourselves? My dear, there's something called in the science of logic, it's called the concept of, or the practice, or the art of, precisely the art of fallacy. That's a special study in logic. There are people who are experts in making fallacies and in breaking and refuting and detecting fallacies. Oftentimes, when you get into the deeper level of understanding any religion or anything that is intellectual, philosophical, this is where there's so much room for fallacies. And me and you, or in general, let's say a lay person, and when I say lay person, I'm not here to offend. Lay person means someone who does not have the expertise in Islamic sciences at that level. They can easily be misled. And they can say that what this speaker is saying sounds like it's so appealing. The Hawza, the seminary, multiple times in different eras, they would warn the community from certain individuals. Not because they have something against them, no, but because they see the fallacies, but the laymen don't see it. No, but Maulana, this is so appealing to me. Why was a shubha called shubha? Shubha in English is translated to misconception or fallacy or deceptive argument. Shubha comes from the word shabah. Shabah, yashbah. Why is shubha called shubha? Shubha is called shubha because it appears like the truth. It's falsehood, but it appears exactly like the truth. الشبهة سميت شبهة لأنها تشبه الحق. This is attributed to the commander of the faithful ﷺ. That shubha is called shubha from this aspect, that it appears to be like it's haqq. It's like you present a real dollar and a fake dollar. From far away, they look the same. You bring real gold and fake gold. For a person who's not a jewelerist, they look the same. But an expert in jewelry knows that this is not real. In fact, most of us struggle when you go to Iraq for ziyarah to find the real aqiq, right? You ask, which store can we rely on? But this is gemstones. It's not that important. And when it comes to feeding yourself with knowledge, you don't ask that question. So it's important to keep in mind that shubha is not something that me and you can easily detect. We need the help of our ulama. So what's the point of asking before you listen to a alim or a speaker about their credibility, their righteousness, their integrity. Why is that important? Because you can trust that they will not mislead you. You can trust that they will not incorporate fallacies to deceive you. Sometimes they do the fallacies not to deceive you because they themselves are lost. And oftentimes we like to give the benefit of the doubt to these people. I personally don't like the idea of right away going to the conspiracy theory. And right away, the intelligence agency hired them to do this and do that. That's not the right way to look at things. Let's be open-minded, right? Not everyone who has some twisted logic, the agencies hired them. Yeah, they may please the intelligence agencies of this country or that country, because in the end, the more damage you can do to Islam, the more disunity you can do among Muslims and Shia, that makes the enemies happy, without a doubt. But we can't accuse that person of being an agent just because they're talking nonsense or they're saying things that are against the mainstream understanding of Islam. So the first step that we have to keep in mind, and I want us to understand this, is to be careful who we listen to. 2 red flags I want to raise here of those who you want to be careful of when you see these 2 red flags. Red flag number 1, when the speaker is driving wrong way. Most of their content is driving the opposite direction. Everything that is established in mainstream scholarship, they don't agree with. Skeptical about every little thing. That's a red flag. Be careful. I'm not saying mainstream has it all right. The only person that has it all right is one person that exists today. Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi alayhi salam. The second red flag that you want to look for, and be careful, and this is an important one, whenever that speaker or that content producer is only concerned about speaking to lay people and does not want to sit with scholars. Whenever you see them insistent, say, look, bro, you have a new idea, you have nice rhetoric, you have new type of information that we didn't hear about before. It may be true, but here we have ulama that want to discuss this with you. Can you come? The seminary is waiting for you to come there. Say, no, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm already convinced. Here you're being closed-minded, yet you're preaching that everyone should be open-minded, but you're not willing to be open-minded about allowing the scholars to discuss it with you. Why are you afraid? It's a sign that this person is not very confident, because as soon as they will go to the ulama, the calibers and the esteemed ulama, right away they tell them, no, this is wrong, this is a fallacy, and they won't have an answer. So to summarize, the first step that we need to take in precaution to preserve our minds, our hearts from falsehood is to be keen and be very careful who we allow to feed us knowledge. Let's not be mesmerized by their beautiful talk, their nice way of speaking. Some people are fantastic in the way they speak, but they mix, as we say, poison with milk. Things sound like they are very appealing, very attracting, very soothing. The information seems like it's, wow, it's very touchy, but it's mixed with all types of fallacies. That's number 1. Step number 2, do not analyze religious information within the framework of a secular methodology. So do not analyze religious information within the framework of a secular methodology. And we see this a lot, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Now, why would a Shia 12er have a secular methodology? This happens subconsciously. If I grow up from pre-K, all the way until graduating from the university in a secular school, it's natural that the way I will study things and evaluate and analyze them on an intellectual level will be mainly affected by what? Will be affected by this secular methodology, because I grew up with this scientific mindset that everything has to be done according to the method that is adopted in university, in academia, and so on and so forth. That, again, sometimes may not be something that we are conscious to, but it's ingrained. We have already built this very strong structure in our mind that we weigh things based on that. So therefore, whenever we listen to something, if we find it conforming with this methodology, we say that is haqq. And if it's not conforming, we say that is batil. And this is where we enter into this very dark area where we become misled and cause others to be misled. I'll give you a simple example here, is whether a woman can be a judge in the Islamic judicial system or not, or she can be a grand marja or not. That's controversial. Some ulama say we don't have strong evidence to support this. Some ulama say there is some evidence to support this. Now pay attention to this. As a listener who is affected by this secular mindset or the secular methodology, when I hear to the speaker that says it is not permissible for the women to take the position of a judge, I will say right away, this is nonsense. The proof is weak. The other one is strong, very strong point that the women can take judge position. See this? Now, did I reject the first and accept the second because I evaluated the evidence of the first and the evidence? No, no, no. It has nothing to do with that. But because of my preconceived information and the framework that has been built in my mind, this very secular mindset led me to do what? To give credit and accept the second and not the first. And in many other matters, you find us accepting and rejecting based on that type of mindset. You find people saying, no, this doesn't make sense to me. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't conform with their preconceived knowledge and information that is mainly secular in essence. One of the intellectuals who you all know have recently repented, Abdul Aziz Sachadina, right? He sent a letter to the World Federation apologizing and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the community for forgiveness. And you know what he says? And I want to read verbatim. I'm sure you read it, but I want to highlight this because this is important for all of us. It's a lesson. May Allah grant him health and grant him, inshallah, tawfiq. It's a very courageous move to do when you realize that you were wrong and you admit it to people. You know, that proves that the person realized that, you know, nothing is worth remaining arrogant, because when you leave this world with this arrogance, God forbid, you may be resurrected with Iblis. So what does he say? He says, my lifelong attempt to balance the rational and objective standards of modern secular academia while adhering to the responsibilities and standards of my aqidah were in a few but significant instances a failure. Why? As academia is prone to arrogance and airs of intellectual superiority, it was my responsibility to you as my fellow believers to continuously challenge my academic methodologies and conclusions. But the problem was what? That I was accepting these methodologies and using them as a criteria, which led me to make doubts about imamah. Because the main issue that was with the respected person we mentioned was that he touched the area of imamah. Where does this stem from? Because he was so engrossed in this academia style of thinking.